Hello there, all my little jewelry makers. I'm Christina at CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these laced edge wire kumihimo earrings. Now, I did make these specifically to match a previous bracelet design that I made, and I'm going to put a link to that in the description box down below in case you haven't seen it. So of course you can make a set of jewelry, but equally you can use them on their own. So if you want to learn how to make them, then keep watching. So then, as for the materials, first of all we need some wire, and this is a copper based wire that I'm using, and the first gauge is a 0.8 mil, so this is going to be for the braid itself. And then I'm using a 0.6 mil, and this is going to be for adding the embellishment with. So then the other materials and tools that we need is first of all a kumihimo disc, and I'm using a square one. This is just a mini one, but you can use whichever you want. And then I'm using this electrical tape here to help hold the wires together. Now if you want to add beads, I'm using these 3mm Swarovski bicone beads. That's just what I've chosen to use, but you can use whatever kind of beads that you prefer. And then what I'm going to use to finish off the ends of the braid with are these ribbon ends here, and along with them I'm also going to be using my E6000 glue. And then as for the findings, I've got some jump rings here to help put things together, and of course the earring findings. Now you can choose whatever you want to, but I'm using these earring posts and butterfly backs. And then the lengths of wires that we'll need to cut is 8 lengths here of about 40 centimeters each. And what I've then done is I've made sure, first of all, they've all been straightened, and also I aligned them on the end, and then I added this piece of electrical tape, and I just bent the ends back on themselves just so they won't pull through. And now these wires, the braid that we're going to make, is to do for both earrings. So I'm basically going to make one long braid, and we're going to cut up the lengths from that we need. So I'm then going to grab my kumihimo disc here, and we then need to attach our wires first of all. So what I'm going to do is take the end with the tape and put it down through the hole in the center, and then I'm just going to grab onto that end from the back like that and just hold it right there, the hole. So the tape is just going to be basically slightly sticking up, and then we need to start distributing these wires. So what we're going to do is we have 8 lengths. I'm going to use the 4 middle slots on the top and the 4 middle slots on the bottom, and I'm just going to be distributing them. So just going to start from one side here, take the furthest left, and then just put it into, in this case here it's going to be slot number 5, but just the outer one of the 4 middle ones. And then the next one, separate that out. Then I'm going to bring that to the bottom, to the very opposite slot. And then next one, I'm going to go up. I'm just going to alternate like this. And then down here. So I've got 4 wires into 4 slots as of now. Now the last one I put was in the bottom. What I just personally like to do is then kind of act as if there's a line down the center, and then just do a mirrored image. So again, the next one goes down, and then I bring the next one up, and then the last one on the bottom, and the last one on the top. So you can see I've ended up with 4 wires now in the 4 middle slots, both on the top and the bottom of the disc. And still I'm holding on to that very end with the tape on the back, just for now, right underneath the hole. So this is the initial setup, and basically we need to now start doing the braid. So this is going to be the cross kumihimo braid, so that means I'm going to start from the top, and I'm going to start with the 2 middle wires. So I'm taking, out of the 2 middle ones, I'm taking the right one first, and I'm bringing that out to the left side, and then I like to just swap hands, and then I take the left one of those 2 middle ones and bring it out to the right and into the slot on the side. Now we've done that, we then need to move all the wires on the bottom and the top onto opposite sides of where they're currently at. So because we have now the 2 free slots on the top, that means I need to start on the bottom. So again, I kind of imagine I have a line down through the center of the disc, and I have a left side and a right side. So I'm just going to start on the left. It's just personal habit, really. So out of the 2 middle ones on the bottom, I'm taking the left one, or the inner one of the ones on the left side, and then that just goes up and over and into the very exact opposite slot on the top. so the left one of the two empty ones. And then the next one out, release that. That comes down, goes into the empty slot on the bottom. The next one out, which is the last one, goes up and into the empty slot on the top. So like that. And then we need to do the other side of the disc, which is the right side. So that means I need to take the right one of the two middle ones on the bottom here, and then that goes up and over and into the remaining empty slot on the top. The next one out, release that, and that comes down into the empty slot on the bottom. And finally, the last one from the bottom goes up and over into the empty slot on the top. So as now you can see, instead of having 2 on top and 4 wires on the bottom, we now have the 4 on the top and 2 on the bottom, but they're in the middle. So we have a free slot on either side, which means it's the side wires here that we then need to bring back in, and they need to fill in the bottom side of the disc basically. So start on one side, doesn't matter which one. I'm just releasing the right one first, and then bringing that down into that right slot on the bottom, and then the left one, and bringing that into the left slot on the bottom. So again, we've now completely come back to the original setup of 4 wires in the middle, 4 slots on the top and on the bottom. So this is the basic way of how to make this braid structure. And I'm just going to go through it again because I just want to give a few hints and tips, because we are working with wire, which is quite different than working with cord for kumihimo. So I'm going to start a new round and start the same way. So everything is repeated now over and over again to make the braid. But I'm going to release out of those top 2, the right one first. Always make sure to start with the same one. Now what I like to do is when I'm working with wire, I release the wire and then I like to smooth it out, because when you pick it out of the slot, you can see it kind of has a little bend to it. So I always make sure to smooth that out. And then in this case, I need to bring it out to the side. As I'm doing that, I want to also make sure to kind of control the wire here in the middle, because I prefer to get my braids as tight as possible. So to do that, I use my finger to kind of help push down as I'm laying that wire across the others to come out to the side. So I'm pushing down here and then bringing it out to the side and into the slot. And then of course, same principle, release the other one, smooth it out. And then as I'm bringing it out to the right side, you can see as well, sometimes they kind of want to pop out, but just pop them back in where they belong. And then press down, and that's kind of a way of getting them to lay as tight as possible. Like that, bring it out to the side. And then I'm going to start doing the bottom and the top ones to the opposite sides. So here, it's the same principle, but let me just release this bottom one that I'm going to move. Smooth out the wire by running it through my hands and fingers. And here, what I'm going to do, by bringing it up and over, I put my thumb underneath and I use that to push against the wire, and also as I'm going over, push down. So same principle, this wire gets put as tight as possible against the others that it's crossing over, like this. The next one needs to smooth it out there, needs to then come down, and here I just use my index finger. Same principle, put it underneath, and then as you're bringing it down, push against in the middle there. And then the last one, again, because it's coming from the bottom, I use the thumb to push against the other wires as I'm bringing it up. And then I'm swapping hands. I'm still holding on to the tape part underneath there, right underneath the hole. And then on the other side, same difference. I'm just using my other hand. So release the wire, use the thumb to, with a bit of, you don't have to push really hard, but use a bit of strength and then push against the other wires. And it just achieves getting the braid as tight as possible. And then the top one comes down, use your index finger. Get the other ones back into place. And the last one, thumb again, and into place. And then here, the last ones we have to do are the ones on the side and bring them back into the braid. So again, one at a time, smooth it out. And then what I always do is, as I'm holding the wire in my hand and kind of tugging at it a little bit, I like to then use my index finger to push against the side of the braid with that wire. And that kind of helps tighten it up a little bit in the middle there, as I'm then bringing it down and into that bottom slot. Swap hands, and it's the same with the other side. Grab hold of it, make sure to tug at it a little bit, and then as you're tugging at it and moving it downwards, push against the side of the braid and then place it into the slot. And it just, like I said, tightens up the braid a little bit as well, pushes the sides together. So that's how I then recommend doing the braid structure to get it as tight as possible. And now literally it's a matter of just repeating this over and over and over again. And also just keep holding the braid underneath the hole there. So even as your braid grows on the bottom and becomes longer, you want to keep your hold and your grip there right underneath the hole, because that's where you have most control, as opposed to say holding it all the way down here. It will kind of be moving around. So keep holding right underneath that hole, but otherwise just keep braiding like this until you have your full length of braid. So now I've kept going and I've braided until I pretty much have no more wire to use there. So I'm just gonna release all the wires from the slots so we can take this off our disc, and obviously then use the braid for the next step. So I like to kind of just straighten up my ends here, just so they're not sticking in all directions. Like that. And then I have the full length of the braid. Now, because I know I'm going to use the full length of this braid, cut it in half and use it for both earrings, what I'm going to do first of all is just get rid of the ends, because obviously I don't want to be using them. So I'm literally going to cut off the end right where the braid starts. And I'm using my heavy duty flush cutters here as well, because we're going through a lot of wires, because obviously they're all kind of mixed up in the braid. So I'm just starting from one side and just doing a little bit at a time, going straight across, cutting through. So we basically, first of all, obviously get rid of the end, but we then also have a straight line there. And of course I'm going to just flip it, do the same thing with the other end, just literally cut off. Basically here it's just cutting off the ends of the wire, but again straight across. So I have basically as much braid as possible that I can then use to start shaping the earrings. So I have my straight lines there on both ends. And what I then want to do is cut it in the middle so we can get our two lengths, obviously one for each earring. But what I want to do is make sure that I'm cutting it precisely in the middle. So for that I'm going to just bring in my measuring tape. And obviously also because any braid can be slightly different in length depending on your tension. So this looks to be literally just about 24 centimeters, almost. So I'm going to place it so I can then obviously work out half of 24 is 12. So I know that I'm going to place my cutters at 12 centimeters, and I can then start cutting across the middle using the same flush cutters there, and again making sure to do it starting on one side and cutting straight across. In a straight line until we get all the way through. we have our two separate pieces that are more or less the same length. Now of course these are just the measurements that I'm working with, and I've ended up with these two braids here to use for the earrings, but you can easily change that up. So for instance, if you want larger earrings, you can make sure to use longer lengths originally, so you end up with longer braids as we're going to shape them now. Obviously if you want them smaller, you can either use less or you can just cut off more of the lengths to get them to the size that you want, because obviously the length of the braid here is going to determine the size of the final earring. But now that I have my braids in place, I'm just going to put one to the side because I'm going to start shaping it, and I'm just going to shape this braid into a teardrop shape. So I'm going to start adding a curve into it in the middle here. And basically the aim is to bring the two ends together, but I'm making sure I'm keeping the braid flat. And we just gradually add more and more of a curve, as you can see. Slowly working our way to bring the ends together, and I'm making sure the sides stay more straight. Now obviously you can play around with the shape, that's completely up to you. We just keep working with this until we have them in that teardrop shape. And then of course once I've shaped this one here, I need to grab the other braid and repeat the same thing. Now what I then like to do is when I'm making the second one is use the first one as a bit of a guide or template, you could say. So I'm just going to keep that handy to the side so that when I'm shaping this one, I'm going to kind of, when I feel like I'm getting there, I'm going to bring in that original one just to make sure they're as similar as possible. Kind of make sure the curve is similar and the overall shape of course. Now hopefully the size should be the same, so not an issue because we cut them the same length, but I'm just using them to compare so they're as similar to each other as possible. So now I've got both my braids shaped and I'm happy with how they are in similarity to each other. Now what I just like to do is, because right at the top here they slightly overlap a little bit, and also obviously because we cut it straight across it's a little bit funky at the top, so just one at a time, what I like to do is basically get this, instead of having points sticking out the corners there, I like to cut across so we get a straight line here, because obviously we're going to need that for when we need to add the ribbon ends. So I like to cut, kind of say you could say cut the corners off, so we get more of a straight line like that. And then also where they overlap, because that adds more bulk and I want this to be kind of flat next to each other, I also like to cut the inner corners off like that, and the other side as well. So I just need to cut off a little bit more there. The braids end up, or the ends of the braid, that end up actually laying flat next to each other, as you can see, instead of overlapping like they were, because then that's gonna help when we add the ribbon ends, because it would be too much bulk if we have kind of two braids stacked on top of each other. So I'm just going to do that with the other one as well, and then we're ready to start adding the decoration. And then to do the laced edge, we need to cut 6 lengths of a 0.6mm wire, and these are about 30 centimeters each. Now I've got 6 lengths for both earrings, which means I'm going to be using 3 wires for each earring. So I'm just going to be working on one earring at a time. So I'm going to take 3 lengths of my wire, and then of course one of the teardrop shapes of the braids. So from that, I'm going to just grab one length here to begin with, and then what we need to do is attach this first of all. So what we're going to be doing is using, you're going to be able to see there's kind of little loops on the very outer edge of the braid, and we're going to use those to basically get this wire through it because it fits perfectly through there. So I'm just going to start on one side and towards the top there, the very end of the braid, and I've just put it through a little bit, kind of the second to last loop, and then I have a short little tail there which I'm then going to bring around. Now what's important here is just to see the direction that we need to do this in, and you're going to be able to see that from looking at the very edge of the braid. So for instance, when I'm going to keep going here, we want the wire, the 0.6 mil, to basically slot in between, following the little path you could say there is, between these loops on the outer edge. So for this one here, this little tail I'm going to bring around back to the front to put it through the very final loop, and this really is just more to attach it. Sometimes I find using some flat nose pliers or these tweezer nose pliers here to grip onto the wire can help a lot, especially if it's just a short little length, because you can struggle a bit to grab onto it with your fingers sometimes. But I'm then putting that end through the very last loop, and then when I tighten this, you're going to be able to see that the actual wire that I'm tightening down, it's going to slot basically in between the two loops and just lay there perfectly and kind of just blend in. Now that's attached now. I'm just going to kind of put this tail a bit out of the way, and then now I'm just going to keep going like this for a bit, but using obviously the long tail. So that means, because here it's coming out of the top, and I'm just going to go through the very next loop that's right next to the one I'm coming out from, but making sure I go through in the correct direction. It's coming out of the top, so I'm going to go around the side and then come through the next loop from the bottom up, just to make sure. Yours might be different, so just keep an eye on the direction that you need to put this wire in, but just pull this through. I like to kind of hold on right close to where the wire that I'm working with is and pull this tight, and then that slots in nicely there and just blends in again. So for now I'm just using this wire, and what we're going to do is work our way down the side, basically work our way to the point where we want the laced part to be. Now I worked further down the side here where I then want my decoration, that laced edge, to start. Now it's completely up to you where you want that to be. Obviously kind of judge it where you think it would look nice to have that laced edge and possibly beads. But I want mine to start here, which means this is the point where I need to then start adding the remaining two wires. So I'm just grabbing the next one here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just leaving that one that I was using just up to the side. Then you're going to be able to see, hopefully, that continuing on that outer edge we have the next loop there, and then what we need to do is skip that and then go through the one after that. So go through, skip one loop, and then go through the next one with a new wire. Oops, just jumped out. Just bring it through. And I'm just doing that because I then like to use the short edge here, or short end of the wire, just to bring back around, just like we did in the beginning, to fasten it in place. And again, just be a little bit easier because it's short here, and then go through that loop that we skipped. It's just easy instead of bringing the whole long length through the first time, and tighten that nicely, because you can also often get a better grip on the wire there with the pliers, which means you can pull it tighter. Now what I'm just going to do is bring it around here, the front, and then basically have it slide into that next little pathway, you could say. But obviously there's no loop to go through because that's where the first wire that we used is coming out. So I'm just going to put it over the front here and just up towards the top so it's out of the way. And then we have this length attached, and then just have that coming out to the side again next to the other one, and then we have one length left. I'm just going to do the exact same thing, skip one loop, go through the next one, and then just use the short tail to bring it around and just come through that loop that we skipped. And then pull it tight. And again, I'm just bringing this around the front. And these ends I'm just going to kind of leave there until we then go to finish them off. Otherwise, this, again, just pull it out. Straighten the wires as well if you need to. So we now have 3 lengths attached to the outer edge of the braid, and it's these 3 now that we're going to use to create that laced effect and also add in a few beads. So we're going to start back with the very first wire here that we used from the very top, and what I'm going to do is first of all kind of weave it through these other wires before we then attach it back to the frame, and that's what's going to create that laced edge. So what I'm going to do is bring this wire here over the next one and under the last one, and then kind of we're holding in that position. In the frame here, I'm going to again skip a loop. So just after that very final wire that we attached, skip the next loop and then go through the one after that. So we're going to continue that pattern because it's the loops obviously where you go through this kind of creates the spacing between the wires. So I want to keep that the same. And then we just gradually pull this tighter, and you're going to be able to see you kind of get this little curve coming out from the braid. Now this part also is your choice how you want this to look. So you can obviously have them very open, so the whole laced decoration part is going to be more open, or you can keep them tighter, so pull them closer to the braid. It's completely up to you how you want yours to look. But then what I like to do as well is just make sure that I like the curve itself, so the shape of it. So if I need to adjust anything, I like to kind of go in and do that along the way. So for instance here, I'm using my tweezers nose pliers, but I'm not kind of squeezing hard because obviously that would straighten it. I'm just using them to help adjust any shape that I want. But then I think I want to leave mine a bit like this. So I want this fairly open. And then the actual wire I'm going to bring back out to the top there and lay next to the other ones. Now this is the new front one. This was kind of the back one, you could say. We then used that, and this is then the new front one. And the next back one is now the one that was in the middle when we started this. So this is in place now. Now, if you want to add beads in, I always recommend that you kind of start with adding that first curve when not adding a bead in. It's not too crucial, you can do it, but I prefer to kind of leave that without a bead regardless. But then what I do want to do now is actually start adding beads in as well. So I have them ready. So first of all, let's just have a look here. The next wire that we're due to take is the new first one, you could say. So I'm going to go to the very end of that and then add my bead. Get a little bit of bling on there. And then otherwise, just let that bead drop down. Make sure it kind of stops against the first curve. But then I take this wire and then bring it through the other wires in the exact same way that I did the first one. So I go over the next one and under the last one. And then after that, on the edge here, I'm skipping a loop. So there's a loop right here, I'm skipping that, and then I'm going through the next one and pulling the wire through. And then just gently pull it tighter. And then what I like to try and do is have it match the first loop as much as possible, if that's what you want. Obviously you can also kind of adjust them and kind of have them different sizes, maybe start a bit tighter and then have it get more open, make it a bit gradual. That's also a look you could go for. But then again, using my tweezer nose pliers to just help adjust this loop so I more like the way it looks, but also so the shape of it kind of more fits the other one. But then it looks something a little bit like that. And then we've made sure that that bead sits kind of on that outer edge, because it stops against the other beads now. It maybe can move a little bit, that's fine. But that's why you can also play around with obviously the size and the shape of the beads that you want to use. So there's a lot of options. But then otherwise, if you're happy with that, then take the length of wire there that we've been using, bring it back out next to the other ones, and now that's the new front one. And then we move on to the next one, which is the new first one here. Go to the end, add a bead if you want to. Let it drop all the way down. Again, it stops against that wire. And then it's just a matter of going over and under, and then skipping a loop and coming up through the next one. And then pull this tighter as well until you've reached how you want this curve to be. So again, I just want to adjust it as I'm pulling it. Help it along the way. Like that. So you can see the bead here, and this one is going to sit in the same place. But that is basically how you add in this laced effect. Bring that wire back up when you're happy. And then of course also the beads if you want to add them as well. So you just keep going like this to the other side, and then what I'm going to do is continue to the point where obviously I've kind of reached the equivalent side on this opposite side here to where we started out. So now I made my way to the other side there, and I know that the next wire that I'm going to move and kind of curve I'm going to make is going to be the last one, because that's going to match nicely where it's going to finish off compared to the beginning there on the other side. So the last one where I added a bead was the final one. So for this wire here, what I'm going to do is, instead of weaving it through, because it's kind of just going to add extra work, I'm literally just going to bring it straight underneath both of them, because all we're going to do with these after this is finish them off. So again, I'm skipping the first loop and going through the next one, and then pulling to get that nice curve. And obviously again, make it match as nicely as possible. And I also like to make sure, just adjust this here, that I'm having a look at obviously the very first loop or curve, so they match nicely as well, just so it looks as even overall as possible. So just bring it through, adjust anything you need, and then I'm going to try and get it to the same size as the first one. And of course then bring this out, the wire, to the side and lay next to the other ones. And then just have a look, and you can judge and see if you want to make any adjustments. I recommend doing it now before we was to get rid of these wires here. But then this is going to be how the laced edge part looks, and obviously I've chosen to add in beads as well. And then for the next part, of course, we need to just go up the side and this side as well, the same way as we did when we started out. So I'm just taking that very final wire that we just used and literally continuing in the same way. So now I want to go through the very next loop, because this is where we're literally going to go up the whole side through each loop. And just keep doing this until you reach the very top. So now what we have to do basically is just finish off all these wires. So all the others here, the two on this side and then the two at the very top, they're ready just to finish off. But these two down here that we went behind when we did the very last curve, we just need to kind of get into position before we can finish off. So right now they're coming out through one of those loops in the braid, but they're literally just coming out through that after making one of the curves. So we just need to kind of fasten them a little bit more. So we also have a free loop right in front or behind, depending how you look at it, of each of them. So I'm going to use that to basically do when we first attached them, we went through an extra time. So I'm just going to grab this one and just go down through the curves here to get to the other side, so we can get this wire to run through that little pathway between the loops in the braid. And then I'm going to come up through the next loop in the braid, like I said, the one that's free right next to it, and just pull this through. So this is a little bit tight, so again I'm going to grab my pliers because I can get a better grip and pull it all the way through there, which now, having gone through that extra loop, gives it an extra fastening, you could say, so it's going to be much more secure. And then just bring it straight out to the side again. Now this one is done and we just got to do the same with the other one. So I'm just first of all going down through the curve, that laced part that we created, and then come up through that free loop in the edge of the braid, and then bring this all the way through. So this also is going to run along that path and just kind of blend in. You can also use pliers to kind of help push it in place if you need to. And then bring that back out. So we've now just, with these two wires, gone through an extra time, and that's fastened them nicely in place. So these are now also in place and ready to be finished off, just like the rest of them. And then to finish off the wires, I'm going to grab my fine flush cutters here, because you can really get into more tight spaces with the very tips. So it's basically the same with all of them. I'm just going to show in a few. So here are the ones that we just did. What I want to do is make sure that the end of the wire, when we cut it off, isn't going to stick out and catch or scratch on anything. So it's kind of continuing in this next path, but the loop obviously is occupied. So I'm going to cut off the excess of the wire, a bit like that. But then, if you can maybe see it, or you can see it on your own, make sure you cut it off so there's a little bit of the wire kind of sticking out, so a couple of millimeters or so, if that, so that when I push this down, it's going to basically still go into that pathway around the edge of the braid, and the very end is going to basically butt up against the wire that is going through the next loop. And that is how I'm tucking it away so it's not going to catch or scratch on anything. Same with this next one here. Cut off the excess, but make sure there's just 1 or 2 millimeters left of the end, so that we can squeeze this down and basically push it into the pathway. And therefore out of the way. Now on the other side, these are already in position. So here I think I'm going to flip it to the back and just where I can kind of get to the wire with my pliers from. Something like that. And then again, just always make sure to push the end down and out of the way. Of course, the other one is the same thing. Just cut off the excess. Just leaving enough length left so that we can tuck it away. And also, kind of, it won't be noticeable in that way. It'll just blend in nicely. As for the top ones, it's literally just cutting them off, because obviously there's no more braid up there to kind of bring anything through. But then just make sure the very end gets pushed again out of the way so it's not sticking out anywhere. And also, once we add the ribbon ends, we don't want any wire to be sticking out of the sides, of course. So just bring this around as if it was going to go through the next loop, which obviously isn't there. But then just cut off the excess. And then just squeeze it into place. And that's just how you want to get rid of all these wires that were used to make this laced edge. And of course, you want to repeat this on the other earring as well. And then all that's left to do is finish off the top here with our ribbon ends. So alongside the ribbon end, I'm also going to be using my E6000 glue here, because the ribbon end itself is not going to be enough, because obviously that's metal. We're going to add it onto metal. So we need this glue just to be extra strength between the two pieces. And so it's nice and durable. So I have my ribbon end handy. Before we actually use it, I want to make sure I then add my glue. So I'm just using here a toothpick to help apply it. And I just want to get a little bit of glue onto it. It doesn't need to be too much, because obviously it's going to be clamped down and it's just going to then come spilling out if it's too much. But add a bit of glue and then make sure to get that inside of the ribbon end here. So make sure to cover, you could say, the inside walls nicely like that. And then what I like to do is kind of with the remaining glue that I have on my toothpick, I like to add that onto the end of the braid where the ribbon end is going to go, and just make sure to get it in between the wires there in all the nooks and crannies, because then when you put the two pieces together, they're gonna, and obviously it dries, they're gonna really adhere nicely, because the glue is really going to be in between the wires and make it much more durable long term. Now I think I just want to add just a little bit more to the braid itself, not too much again, but just get a little bit more glue in between the wires there. So I make sure that we have the strongest bond possible. And then I'm going to take the ribbon end, place it onto the ends of the braid there, and I'm going to take my flat nose pliers, in this case, a bit more control with them, and then I keep hold of my piece in my hand gently, and then grab hold of the ribbon end on either side while I then start to clamp it down. Now I don't like to go into one place and just do a big kind of squeeze. I like to kind of do it gradually, and when it's almost all the way tight, I'm just going to remove my fingers, so because it can kind of slip around quite a lot as you're flattening it down. So just make sure it stays in place and that it's in the middle when you go in and do your final squeeze, so it doesn't slip very far to one side or something. And I also like to go in just from the sides, just to kind of close up the sides of the ribbon end nicely. So a bit like that. And then once it's all the way and you're happy with how it's sitting, then all that's left to do is obviously leave it to dry. And then we have this loop in the ribbon end where we can attach our earring finding using jump rings. So once you made both of the earrings and let the glue dry, you have your complete set of earrings ready to wear. And of course you can make it match the bracelet that I previously made, so you have a matching set of jewellery. Now for more wire kumihimo designs, you can check out my book that's available to buy online. I'm going to leave a link for it in the description box down below so you can check it out. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one.